and also at the end have room for Q&A. So to get us started, I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar alongside 4 leading education organizations whose materials and resources for curriculum planning are on Composer. So today you'll hear from High Resolves, Global Nomads Group, World Savvy, and Videos for Change. And before we get started, we wanted to just take a quick poll to just see where everyone's at in terms of their own familiarity with Composer. So in 1 second, I'm going to launch a poll. So I'll give everyone maybe the next 20 seconds to just answer, how familiar are you with Composer and its platform? Maybe another 5 seconds. Awesome. All right. So it looks like we have, about 43% of you saying that you're somewhat familiar with Composer, and then about 32% saying that they're very familiar. So that's really great. And then 18% not so familiar. So I'm going to end the poll. And just to kind of get us started, we really want to, introduce Composer to everyone here. So Composer is a digital platform free for educators to both access a content library rich with curriculum resources, but it's also a place for educators to design curriculum. And it's all really easy to use through our design studio, all for citizenship education resources. So it really helps to educators to really find, combine, and share resources to create engaging lesson plans for their students. What do we mean by citizenship education? So at Composer, we believe in equipping students to act for the well-being of themselves, their communities, and the planet through these 4 competencies: civic learning, social and emotional learning, global competence, and social justice. And so all of the content that you'll find on Composer falls into one or more of these domains. And we're really that platform to bring citizenship education for all. So today you'll hear from 4 organizations, which we call content providers, but as you see here, there's 30 organizations and growing that make up a global citizenship education ecosystem. And we're really excited because we know that even on today's call that some of the organizations that are part of this ecosystem are on the call with us. And if you're an educator, you might even see some familiar organizations too. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bijan to talk through what we mean about strings and curriculum design.
All right, thanks, Leanne. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Bijan Kazaruni, and I am a high school history teacher based in Southern California. This past summer, actually, I've been working with Composer and the way it represents content and curriculum on the site. And today, I'm really excited to share with you all the string that I've designed for the webinar that we have for today. As an overview to the string itself, the purpose of this unit really is to have students to start thinking about and examining issues related to food justice. And in case you're wondering what food justice is, it's this structural view of our current food system that sees access to healthy food as a human right. And so there are many directions that we can go with this particular topic, but for our purposes today, this hybrid string is going to focus on issues that would get in the way of that sort of access that I just mentioned. For example, these could be topics such as the relationship between climate change and food security, challenges to food access within rural and urban communities, and of course the effects of GMOs on food production as a whole. And if you notice below the string itself, here's some learning outcomes that I've created for this unit plan. Students will be able to address key issues within the topic of food justice, understand the global impact of food access, share their experiences with food through storytelling, and create awareness for food justice through Videos for Change, which we'll talk more about later in this presentation today. Again, this is just an example of a potential string that one can create on Composer, and there are many more topics and themes available on the site to explore. But if we can actually get a feel for the room right now, I'd like to pose this question to everyone. what are topics within the realm of civics and citizenship education that you are passionate about? What are things that strike you as interesting? What are some topics that you would be interested in teaching yourself, within that domain of citizenship education? So go ahead, take a moment in the chat to type something down below, and we'll see what everyone comes up with. Okay, wonderful. Wow, I'm seeing a lot of responses here. Um, Goal setting and motivation, collective action, civil discourse, making civics education tangible for students, identity development. All these are great topics, and I can assure you that you will find strings and elements that deal with these topics on Composer as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for sharing that. So now I would like to pass it off to my colleague Matt, who will go over the learning science and theory behind designing a string on Composer.
I am currently muted. I apologize. Thanks, Bajan. As Bajan said, my name is Matt Owens. I am the head of curriculum and content for Composer. And so before we dive dive in deep on Bajan's string, just wanted to take a moment to go over the theory behind Composer and how we think about and organize content on the site. So Composer really is for educators who are interested in citizenship education. And we at Composer believe citizenship education is incredibly important. And we think that there should be a systematic way of approaching it in our classrooms. So to that end, one of the core value propositions of Composer is we have created a common language and framework for thinking about citizenship education, bringing together that diverse array of providers that you saw on the screen earlier to create a sense of unity around how we bring this content into our classrooms. So we do that primarily through strings. And by strings, we simply mean curricula or units centered around these sequences of learning dealing with citizenship education. And those strings are comprised of what we call elements, which are simply discrete learning experiences. So they can take place over 1 or 2 classroom sessions. We have 3 different kinds of elements on the site: peak experiences, repeated practices, and real-world applications, which I'll go into depth here. So a peak experience is an aha moment, and it's represented on Composer as a triangle, signifying the mountaintop experience that we expect from peaks. Peaks are immersive, they're affective, they're experiential and memorable. It's an opportunity for a student to discover new knowledge, as well as find a sense of curiosity or motivation around a particular topic. This is a place for us as educators to demonstrate the value and urgency around a particular piece of knowledge or a learning. Because honestly, we should be making the case to students that the learning journeys that they're about to undertake are worthwhile. So qualities of these peak experiences are they're immersive, they're affective, they're experiential and memorable. They're really outside of the ordinary experience of the classroom. And as a couple of examples that we'd like to share, they can be immersive workshops or simulations. They could be museum visits, particularly like a powerful exhibit, as well as powerful films. So, if you've experienced a film before that really kind of, caught you off guard and really, prompted you to think about the world in a new and interesting way. And we like to start these strings with peak experiences as a way of addressing that motivation component and getting students excited about the learning journey. But we know that those mountaintop experiences aren't enough to translate like new knowledge or awareness into actual behavior and new and skills and application in real life. We know that that only comes through practice. So each peak experience is then followed up with what we call repeated practices, and these are represented on Composer as squares, signifying the 4 walls of the classroom. And this is really the bread and butter of the string. It's where students have an opportunity to take the skills and knowledge introduced in the peak experience and work on applying it, starting with maybe foundational or basics concepts and knowledge, and working on in those increase in complexity and difficulty over time as students are stretched to think about how they can apply the skill in new ways. And these are typically what we think of when we think of our classroom lessons. So they can be activities, exercises, or other lessons that we bring into the classroom that challenge students to stretch their knowledge and their skills. But if the whole idea behind practice is to stretch and grow and expand how we might, bring a skill into our lives, what's more complex and difficult of an area to apply a skill in than the real world? So we end each string with what we call a real world application. And these are represented by circles on Composer signifying the world. And so this is the culmination of the effective practice component of the string, where students take what they've learned in the classroom and apply it to real life, with really having a focus on impact outside of the classroom. These are typically, what we think of as action-based learning, project-based learning as well, really focusing on taking those skills and moving them out into real life. We've seen as examples of real-world applications before, and you'll hear some examples in a moment, but these can be community projects, service learning, or digital awareness campaigns. They can be at the community level, but they can also be within the school. We've seen great examples of real-world applications where older students write storybooks, for example, on identity and share them with younger students in their school. Really, the scope of impact is whatever you want it to be. But so that's how we think about organizing content. But really, Composer is a powerful curriculum design tool. So in addition to our robust content library, we also have available for you a resource to design your own strings on Composer, just like Bijan has done. So you see here on the screen a screenshot of the Create page on Composer. And on the right in the circle with the arrow, you can see the string strength meter. So as you build your string, we have actually built into the background of the site a feedback mechanism that will provide real-time live feedback on the strength of your string using the heuristic rules that we have built into the back end of the site, which I'll share a couple of examples for you here on the next slide. So for example, we have space available in the Create Studio for you to include narrative outcomes. We suggest doing this for all of you familiar with backward design principles, because starting with our outcomes helps anchor the scope and sequence of our string and the actual concrete goals. And we do know that it's easier to learn when you know kind of the explicit learning goals that are part of the learning journey. We also recommend that each string includes one of each of the different types of elements, and that for each peak experience that you introduce, that you include approximately 8 opportunities to practice that new knowledge or skill, a combination of repeated practices and real-world applications. But then finally, as I mentioned, we like to start strings off with the peak experience, since that's where you make the case to students that there's something intriguing or interesting about the learning journey. So we recommend that peak experiences come in the first third of the string. And since the real world application represents the culmination of the experience to apply the skill in a complex setting, we recommend that the real world application comes in the final third. So just as some general tips before moving forward and introducing our panelists here on the call, as we walk away from this webinar, we do suggest that you start drafting learning outcomes. We like to use the phrase "one simple thing" for a string, and it's just that you really are focusing and drilling in on the 1 or 2 skills that you really want to just focus on over the course of the string. As I said, we recommend starting with a peak experience to really address motivation and introduce new knowledge, and that you follow up with that from there with scaffolding out your practice elements. They increase in complexity and difficulty over time, and then ending with a real world application to give students the opportunity to put their skills into practice. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to some of our panelists just to introduce themselves. We have a lot of great providers on the call who I'm excited to have been able to work with as we've launched Composer over the last couple of months. So first, I'd like to turn it over to Roxy from High Resolves to introduce herself.
Hi, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Roxy Pernia, and I'm the National Program Director for High Resolves in the US. I'm super excited to be here, particularly because I think the collaboration that can happen between and across our organizations is really powerful. And so I'm grateful to Composer for providing us with a tool that makes that collaboration more possible and more common. But a bit about High Resolves. High Resolves is a global education nonprofit organization. Our vision is a generation of young people resolved to make a positive difference to the world. And to achieve this, we design and deliver learning experiences that support the development of key 21st century competencies with a focus on middle and high school students. We also provide professional development opportunities for teachers to be able to implement these types of learning experiences in the classroom as well. And we have both in-person and remote learning experiences for both student-facing and teacher-facing experiences. Thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Roxy. Now I'd like to turn it over to Nicole from Global Nomads Group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole. I'm the Director of Program Operations at Global Nomads Group. Global Nomads Group is a nonprofit. It's been around for 20 years, and we create virtual educational experiences for youth to build their empathy, global awareness, and empower them to take positive action in their communities. One of our programs, Student to World, is represented on the Composer site. There are 4 different themes in that program. We have Art and Action, Global Hunger, Pandemic One World, and Ocean Health. And just a bit, we'll explore the global hunger theme as part of the string that's being highlighted today. So super excited to be here with every one of you, as well as the collaborative organizations that we'll be working with. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. And now I'd like to turn it over to Cassie.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassie. I'm the Global Operations Manager for Videos for Change. Totally echo Nicole and Rox. It's so great to be a part of today's session and to be collaborating. Videos for Change was created by High Resolves as a student-led project-based real-world learning opportunity. I think we all know that young people care deeply about the issues in their world and they want to be a part of the solutions. We design Videos for Change as a simple but a powerful way for them to be engaged and active in the issues that they're really passionate about, and for a chance for them to have their voices heard. This is done through the process of creating 1-minute videos and sharing them to inspire change in their communities. We started in Australia as a national competition for our secondary students. We now have schools, camps and youth groups across the world embedding the program to meet their needs, and it's really exciting to be building this global community of young change makers.
Thanks, Cassie. I'd now like to turn it over to Mallory from World Savvy, who is going to talk us through the theme of global competence, which is one of the 4 domain areas on the site, but who will explain like how World Savvy thinks about the concept of global competence. Mallory, over to you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues earlier. I'm so excited to be here. I love engaging and collaborating with like-minded organizations in the spirit of promoting global competence, civics engagement, education, and all of the above. So I'm the Director of Professional Learning for World Savvy. World Savvy is a national education nonprofit that envisions a K-12 education system that prepares all students with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions for success and active engagement in our global community. So similar to some of the partner organizations here today, we really approach learning and believe that it's based on students learn best when they're engaged in relevant and important issues that impact their communities and the broader world. So our educational approach is grounded in cultivating connections, promoting active interdisciplinary learning, fostering knowledge to action, and reflecting and adapting. All of the work that we do at World Savvy is underpinned by the idea of global competence. And so I want to walk you through a little bit of how we approach global competence at World Savvy. So this is how we define global competence. It's the competencies, the knowledge, the skills, the dispositions necessary to navigate and succeed in today's interconnected world. So we know that the world is rapidly changing, and the ability to be engaged citizens and collaborative problem solvers is key for all. And as we move into the 21st century rather, and beyond, this is what all people need, not just students, all people. To be engaged citizens, to be prepared for jobs for the future, and to be local and global problem solvers. So if we move to the next slide, global competence matrix. So this is really the base for all of the work that we do. This matrix here was created in collaboration with the Teachers College at Columbia University, as well as the Asia Society, in the support of the launch of our Global Competence Certificate, which is a online master's level certificate program for in-service teachers to build a globally competent teaching practice. So this is research-based and grounded in a couple of different areas you see here, core concepts making up the bulk of, or the background rather, of the matrix, and then dividing it into behaviors, values, and attitudes and skills. So as we think about the string that we're going to take a look at with some of the objectives that Bijan shared earlier, addressing key issues within the topic of food justice, understanding the global impact of food access, students having their opportunity to share their experiences with food through storytelling, and creating awareness for food justice, a variety of these competencies come into play, right? So thinking about world events and global issues that are complex and interconnected, students being able to adopt shared responsibility and take action collectively together, cooperatively, a desire to engage with others, thinking about empathy and storytelling. So all these little pieces that make up the broader matrix and support the work that we do with educators. I do like to just note when we introduce the matrix that this is not meant to be a checklist. Global competence is not something that one arrives at, but something that we all continually strive towards. It's developmental and it's contextual in nature. So this isn't sort of a destination, but rather the journey there. I think it's important to highlight. So with that, I will turn it over to Bijan to take us through the string.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mallory, for sharing that with everyone. And again, really excited to have everyone in here on the call today, especially our providers who are here as panelists. So now I'd like to share with everyone my thought process and approach to really designing this string for the webinar for today. So I'm just going to move off the presentation and take you guys over to Composer so we can see it over there. Here it is. Okay, so this is the search page on Composer. The string that we're going to present today is already live on the site. So if you use search terms such as justice, you'll find that it is already up here in the search results. And I'm just going to walk through with everyone my approach to designing this. But I guess before I get into that, I think it's important to talk about, I guess, the concept of my own concept of curriculum design and just designing this string. So before we start designing and searching through elements and whatnot, I think it's important to first think about your learning needs as a school community, as well as the context that our students exist in as well. So really relating this to the issue or the topic of food justice, there are several guiding questions such as, how many of our students are on free or reduced lunch programs? How many of them don't have access to healthy foods or healthy meals outside of school? And relating this now to what's going on in the world, how has the global pandemic affected students' access to these healthy foods as well? So really, these are all questions, and the whole purpose behind asking these questions is to see how we can make the content and the curriculum relevant to our student and understanding of their needs as well. So I guess the point I'm trying to really make here is, where do I see the string then or curriculum being used within my own lesson planning or curriculum planning? So as a world history teacher, I can say for certain that I would definitely be teaching this particular string within my unit on globalization, looking into specifically changes within our food system over the past few years. But I can also see this string being used and implemented in other subjects such as health science, where students will go through a unit on nutrition. And this is really to emphasize that civics isn't really reserved for the humanities subjects, that really it is something that can be taught across various curricula. And it just really is up to us as teachers to make that known and collaborate with each other so that we can go across different curriculum. But now, going into the string itself, first we have our peak experience over here, provided by High Resolves. It's a documentary titled If You Build It. And just real quickly, the premise of it, pretty much students and teachers work together to bring a farmer's market to their local community. And the intent of this element, as Matt had mentioned earlier, is to serve as that sort of hook or that buy-in that students can have into the learning unit. And it gets them really feeling inspired and hopefully motivated to take on issues that we're about to explore within this topic of food justice. So from there, we're going to transition over to the repeated practices. And first, I'd like to bring our attention to the elements provided by Global Nomads Group, whose curriculum over here focuses on really our relationship with food. Not so much understanding food from the perspective that we need it for survival. I mean, yeah, of course, we need that. But more so that, what are the specific rituals that we practice when it comes to eating food? What are those interactions looking like? Understanding that we as people are socialized to interact with food based on our own customs and even cultural practices. And something I'd like to point out for those of you that have noticed, you'll see that these elements over here are kind of locked together. This is something that we called a locked sequence. And the intent behind this is just to let educators know that, hey, we have this great curriculum from this provider, but these elements really need to be taught together within the same unit plan. So that's why they're locked together. So if you want to drag an element into your string and it comes within a locked sequence, it's kind of a package deal in that sense. But since this is a hybrid string, it would make more sense for this fourth element over here, the everyday action lesson, to be taught closer to the end of the string, which will serve more as a building block for the real world application. The only reason for that being that this lesson asks students to consider issues and start coming up with action plans involving global hunger and food justice. So from like a planning perspective, that's what would make more sense for me. But even though Composer recommends that we adhere to these locked sequences, we as teachers still have the flexibility to decide and determine where it makes sense to implement these sort of lessons and to sequence them however we see fit. Okay, so now going into the world savvy elements. So the intent for this first introductory set of lessons is to sort of serve as a foundation to get students really prepared and thinking about food and food justice, hopefully without getting them too hungry, which is then where I see a transition going into the next series of elements, which are treated more so as case studies. So these elements provided by World Savvy, various case studies, as I said, dealing with specific issues that we find within the realm of food justice. So the first one I'd like to point to is on the relationship between climate change and food security. The next one is on the topic of food deserts. And then finally, the third one is about food technology and the pros and cons of GMOs and pretty much their effects on a global scale. The purpose of having these elements over here are to really get students thinking about issues that they would be interested in for their final projects for this unit plan, which is now going to bring us to the real world application, the Videos for Change challenge. So with this element, students are going to create videos on a topic that they're choosing within the realm of food justice, of course. And the idea behind these videos is to have students do something creative that also raises awareness to these issues that we've been focusing on over the course of this unit plan. These videos can be easily shared and are products that students can really feel and claim full ownership over. It kind of, connecting this back to the earlier part of the string, in the same way that we saw students in the documentary and the Peak Experience creating change within their own communities, Videos for Change really provides an opportunity for students to feel like they can make a difference as well. So in a way, it all kind of comes back full circle with students now feeling empowered to be change makers themselves by the end of this unit and lesson plan. And that's pretty much my explanation of the string itself. A few quick things before I turn it back over again to our panelists. In terms of timing and how long it took me to design this string, from start to finish, about 2 hours. But this is about 15 days worth of instruction as well. So that number, of course, is going to be flexible, like 15 days, give or take, depending on your own personal pacing and style as a teacher. But I just wanted to say that, this resource, Composer, is just a huge time save and a very valuable element that I can see many educators using in the future, and so on, as soon as they start implementing more civic engagement and citizenship education in their classrooms. And these are all high quality lessons as well, by the way. So I think it really lends to just what amazing things Composer is doing and how amazing it is to have all these great providers having all their materials available on one site to access that on as well.
Thank you, Bijan. Appreciate you going into depth with your string with us. I would now like to transition into more of a moderated discussion with our panelists who have, thankfully joined us today. So we'd just like to start off with the question. What are your impressions? And this is just for everyone who would like to answer. What are your impressions of the string that Bijan's created? What are your reflections?
And if I can add real quick, this is a great time for me to get feedback as well. So please just go at it.
I think the string is incredibly powerful. I think the part of the string that I really like is the way that storytelling is woven throughout to help build empathy and understanding around some of the complexities associated with food access and justice. I think for our students, it really helps to build that emotional connection and break down some of those technical components that can be quite challenging to process. It's great that the students also get the chance to share their stories, and then explore different perspectives and experiences through the documentary and through the case studies before they get to Videos for Change, where they then use storytelling to create impact. So I thought that was a really powerful part.
Thanks, Cassie.
And I'll just echo what Cass said about storytelling, and also what Bijan said about, like, it kind of comes full circle a little bit, because with the documentary and with the film, they are starting to think about, okay, what's a problem that is happening in my community? How can I take action towards it? And then at the end, they revisit that question and start to actually take action in a way that means something to them. So I think there's a lot of amazing things happening along the way, and I think it's super well designed.
Thank you, Roxy.
I'm just going to add to that I think one of the things that really stands out to me is how action-oriented the string is. All of these different elements or locked sequences build upon one another, and giving youth, empowering them to take that action and create change in their communities, I think is incredibly powerful, and it takes their knowledge and allows them to apply it in a way that's real. And I think another aspect that I think is really awesome here is that the material is all very different. So it engages youth differently and hits on all the different types of learners. So students are, building their knowledge on food justice in many different ways, visually, virtually, in class discussions, case studies, and then creation of an action plan and videos.
Fantastic.
I'd echo that, Nicole. I really appreciate the different modalities used throughout the string, and the approach taken to ensure that all learners have access to the content through the differing elements of the string, and then the component pieces within. I also think the piece about storytelling and empathizing as a through line is so strong and so important right now. Case studies are built at World Savvy. They purposely start with personal stories. So all of the case studies include personal stories for students to be able to start to make human connections with folks who are impacted by these issues as an entry point. And we've found that just to be so impactful and such a great way to start students' own exploration and spur their own connection to issues that they might not have thought about before.
Great, thank you all. And sort of as a follow-up question to that, just thinking about your own contribution to the strings in terms of what's within the elements themselves. How do you see each element from each provider supporting the learning goals that have been outlined within the unit plan?
I can kick off since the first thing is the peak experience, so I'll just start there. But again, that question of sort of like the themes of collective action and problem solving and how can I sort of have an impact in my community and take action come really, really through with the film. It's a documentary, as you mentioned, about a group of high school students, and they decide to build this farmers market because they notice that it's a need in their community. They're in it's very in Bertie County, which is the one of the poorest communities in North Carolina, and they see that there's only one supermarket there, and the prices are super high because they can do that. And so this idea of a farmer's market to bring more access to fresh produce and in a way that's more affordable was something that was really needed. And they've sort of used that idea of what does the community need to actually design a solution that works well. So the themes of charity versus justice and how do I build long-term solutions all come from this film, and you can see how they'll kind of repeat and pop up through the rest of the string as they continue to explore the other pieces of the string as well.
And then just to build off of that, after students have that peak experience and they start to dive into Global Nomads Group's Global Hunger Program, that locked sequence is actually a combination of the 4 modules that make up the program that moves students from diving into that theme at an individual level, then builds to a local level, a global level, and finally culminates with the creation of an action plan. And one of the outcomes I saw here for the string was that, students are sharing their own experience through storytelling. And with the Global Nomads Group program being rooted in storytelling and that really being a through line through the string, in each module, youth are engaging in activities as well as curated media resources and stories that have been created by youth who have already participated in this program. So I think one of the real unique aspects of that locked sequence is that youth are hearing from and learning from their peers from around the world. So they're not just learning about how we produce, waste, and consume food, but also what that looks like in different cultures and communities and countries around the world. And then they get to make those connections as they share their own stories. And when they do share their stories, they're also getting the opportunity to write themselves into the curriculum, since curricula are so often not representative of the communities that they're integrated in. So I thought that was a really cool thing to point out and really builds well from that peak experience that High Resolve created.
I think that the elements from World Savvy, the case studies, really hit on the learning objectives around addressing key issues within the topic of food justice and understanding the global impact. So these 3 case studies looking at food deserts, GMOs and technology and climate change, and food insecurity provide a lens into a variety of different issues within the broader topic of food justice, and do so in a way that allows students to also start to think about even more issues within those sub-issues, right? So looking at something like food deserts, students might be more interested in thinking about access or transportation issues, or food stamps and how that's regulated at the government level. And so there's a variety of different ways that they're able to start to explore and make connections that are important and of interest to them as they move further into the action taking stage in the subsequent elements of the string.
There's 7 elements in the videos for change sequence that scaffold the learning and make it really meaningful for students. And I think it can be really tempting for students to want to just jump straight in and start filming and start creating, but it really is about supporting them to draw on the knowledge that they've gained from their previous elements to help them create a compelling message of change. 1 minute's not a very long time to tell a story. And I think to build on from what you were saying, Mallory, it really is about, helping them choose a specific part of food justice that they feel really connected to, that they feel strongly about, so that they can have a clear focus and a call to action for their audience. I think, the overall heart of the learning is that students develop the confidence that their voice matters and that their actions can make a difference. So I think it's about instilling a sense of ownership over the process and that creative freedom to bring their ideas to life.
Excellent. Thank you all for sharing that. Yeah, I completely agree. It's great to have students feel that they can take that ownership and making that content very relevant to their own lives as well. Kind of continuing along with this discussion within each of your elements. Let's say I'm a teacher, right? Very new to your platform, kind of unfamiliar with what's within each lesson. Would you have any tips or recommendations for implementing the lessons found in your elements, to the highest effectiveness as possible? And feel free to jump in, with whoever would like to jump in first. We don't have to go in order, like how we were doing with the string.
I think for videos for change, the first 3 elements really focus on setting the foundations of the learning and setting them up to for a really positive and successful experience. So, they watch other student videos as a source of inspiration, and to analyse, what are the key ingredients of creating an effective social change message. So I think it's, that sequence is so integral, as we've talked about before. It's ensuring that those foundations are set so that they can really explore those root causes and the symptoms that lead them into creating a focus for their videos. So we guide them through decision-making processes to narrow down their ideas about what they want their audience to think and feel and do after watching their videos. And I think these initial activities it really sets them up for choosing an effective style of video, storyboarding, and crafting a message of change that reflects, what they're passionate about.
For Global Nomads Group, that locked sequence there, each element represents one of our modules. And within each module, there are 3 steps that students will move through. The first is get ready. So students engage in interactive content online, and they get a base knowledge that will carry them into the next step, which is explore. And that's where students get to really dive into the curated media resources and global peer stories, and then finally share. And that's where then they share their own story and make the connections to the information that they've learned, as well as some of the peer stories that they've read. And while teachers, you all are creating distance learning plans or in-person plans or some weird hybrid or something for the unknown, I think one of the tips is looking at this content, looking at the modules and the different steps in the module for the Global Nomads Group program, and seeing which is going to be something that you want to engage your students in synchronously. All the content is online, and it was designed as a personalized learning journey. So it will transition really well to youth engaging in the content at home from their tablet, mobile device, or computer. But if you have that opportunity for in-person or some virtual synchronous engagement with your students, teachers have found that the Get Ready sections are great to do as a whole class activity. And then sometimes the Explore sections are great to break students into different groups and have them dive into different resources and share back out. And then individually work on crafting their own stories. So going into that and kind of thinking about what you might want to bring synchronously with your students and what you can just assign to them to explore on their own. The program is really youth-centered, so it gives them a lot of opportunity to explore things that interest them and allow them to navigate the program on their own.
In terms of high resolves, all of the resources that you can find online on Composer for base camp series, as we call them, or our film experiences, as well as the squares that we have, which are the repeated practices. We've designed these to be as user-friendly as possible for teachers to pick up and use. So you'll go to our content and you'll see a PowerPoint with all of the notes embedded, media embedded, a detailed lesson plan guide with sort of point-by-point notes, a quick start guide, any materials or worksheets that you need or handouts that you need. So for example, if you build it, you'll see all of that available there that you can download and use. We do have what we call our professionally delivered experiences that typically happen, whether it's in person, which was typically how we delivered them, or we do have remote learning experiences available for peak experiences. That would be another way that High Resolves could do the peak experience with students. That's not the film version. But for this string and for what you need for this string, all of that is available for free for download under the section in the content access section. So yeah, and the only thing I would recommend is that our PowerPoint, we do use PowerPoint intentionally because we want educators to be able to edit this for themselves. So really, your students best, your context the best, so you can actually download it and feel free to adjust some questions or make some specific links to whatever you're teaching or whatever your class is about. So I would recommend that folks make these personalized to your students, to your group, and really see how the string kind of links together and make it come to life for you. So yeah.
That's a great segue. Thank you, Roxy, into the World Savvy resources. So our case studies are, and the lesson plan that accompanies it is fairly open-ended in the way that it's able to be implemented. We'll have teachers who might spend a day looking at a case study, and we'll have teachers who will ground the first 3 weeks of a unit on a case study, looking at all the resources that are embedded there. So my recommendation is really to to the extent possible, get to know the content, take into context the context of your learners and their needs and their access points, and think deliberately about how you're going to introduce those curated set of resources in your classroom. We have had teachers in the past who just give the case study to the students and say, okay, go. And they're so overwhelmed by the amount of information in there that they don't know what to do with it. So being deliberate and being mindful about how you want to scaffold that in the classroom. There's recommendations for that in the lesson plan that is included, and essential questions are included in the case study as well to help guide some of that framing. But really just start small, think about how you want to introduce it and how it supports the broader, in this particular context, this string and complements some learning that's already happened.
Great, thanks everyone. And we're going to transition now to the Q&A portion. We noticed that we had some great questions coming in through the chat, and then also through the Q&A function. So this is the time that everyone can, really participate. We want to open this up to everyone who's on the call today. So one of the questions that we did receive was from Tom. Is there a rubric? Do students grade each other's projects while they watch? How do we grade the string as a whole or as a finished project? So I'm going to open that up just to the panelists to maybe share a little bit more.
In Videos for Change, during once students enter into the creative process, and we engage them in a test screening where we use a framework that helps them think about, all of the key elements in creating effective change in their communities. And so they do a test screening, but then they go through a peer review process where they use that framework to be able to offer each other feedback to then go away and create refinements and polishing before they create their end products.
For Global Nomads Group, we have a quality assessment criteria that we include that accompanies each assignment. We also include sample assignments to showcase kind of what an exemplary assignment can look like for the students. We don't have a specific rubric built out because our programs have been adapted for so many different subjects in schools, after school programs, utilize in advisory periods, and then even at home for individual youth. So we really let the facilitators kind of take hold based on the goals and the initiatives that they would like to see for their students and the skills that they would like them to build. But I think that quality assessment criteria is something that a lot of educators have leveraged in figuring out if they want to specifically grade the material or if they want students to kind of participation, or like some participation grading. We also, as students write their own stories, it's really up to the educator as well to choose whether they want to assign, a specific length to the story. Some educators, specifically for ELA, have asked students each story, because they write 3 different stories and then the action plan at the end, choose a different method or type of story. They'll start with prose and then build on to kind of more a visual story, since you can upload photos, and also even assign a poem. So it's really a lot of educator choice there.
I'll say that for the case studies included in the string, we don't provide, we don't utilize any formative or formal assessment for those particular elements. We do, however, have a building global competence rubric that we use more broadly and holistically across our programming, that teachers will utilize and adapt to the different elements and the different resources and experiences that we provide. And that's available on World Civics website if you want to check it out. And certainly something maybe we should add to Composer now that I'm thinking about it.
And for high resolves, kind of similar to what you've heard across, I think, multiple, there's learning outcomes for each element that we've created. So there's sort of a way to know, are my students meeting the outcomes, or what are the outcomes, and are my students meeting them? It really, similar, it goes to the teacher to decide. We have teachers implementing high results curriculum in really different ways. So we have some that are much more informal, or maybe advisory, there's no grade, so it's more about student engagement. And then we have some that are linking it to core content and actually assigning grades. And then for those groups, the teachers may be a little more sort of think through a little more, how do they actually want to assess the outcomes that we are sort of pinpointing for each element or for the entire string.
And yeah, just one other point on that, as well as the peer review processes that we embed in the experience, on Composer there is actually a teaching and learning overview document that incorporates all of the learning outcomes step by step. But to echo the other providers, it really has been designed to be used for flexible application. We have educators using it in classroom context, whole school context, in camps and youth groups. So it has been designed so that it can be embedded to meet their needs.
And I'll just add in one last additional point on the Composer technology side. We do include a space in the string creation studio for users to bring in their own assessment plans, either drawing off the activities that are included by the providers in the string to create their own formative or summative assessments, or to bring in any additional or outside assessment plan that you maybe already be using. So that is one feature and component of the site, and one that actually will continue to build out over time. As a quick plug, and if you're interested, we're working with High Resolves on a project called The Future of Assessment, and a white paper for that has been released on the High Resolves website, and you should go check it out.
Awesome. And I think just as a last question, we had one from JP about where to find resources from High Resolves on Composer, and there's a link in the chat that Roxy had just added. We also have a question from Tom. Is there more traditional social science biology strings already built, or is this more of an advisory elective assignment?
That's a great question. Tom, actually, I'll turn it over to Bijan first to speak to like how he envisioned the string, and then I can speak more to the design of the site generally. But Bijan.
Yeah, so when I envisioned this string, definitely being implemented in a world history curriculum, just within the topic of globalization, but also speaking to like what's available on Composer in terms of like social sciencey or social science materials. Think of it as, all the material on there is dedicated towards civic engagement and citizenship education. That being said, we wouldn't necessarily use this as a resource for like content specific things, but that doesn't mean there isn't content specific stuff on the platform as well. There's plenty of things history related specifically on civil rights movement, looking at government as well, presidents, etc. So like there are like content specific materials on the site, but the intent of it again is just to build up students' sense of citizenship and civic engagement.
And just to add on to that answer from Bijan, yeah, we recognize that educators come to the work of citizenship education from a variety of different lenses. Some come to the work through an elective or an advisory period, and others are interested in the work as part of the core subject area that they teach. So we built the site to be flexible to both approaches, so that if an educator wants to design a string that they would maybe run in a core area classroom, they would be able to do so, and the same would be the case for an advisory period.
Great. And just look, to be respectful of everyone's time, we know that we have about 2 minutes left. So want to just thank everyone for joining us today for our very first Composer Curriculum Design webinar, along with our 4 amazing education organizations that you heard from today. So just want to, again, give our gratitude to everyone who joined us. And then also remind everyone that you can actually create your own string if you go to composereducation.org. And also want to just lastly open up to anyone on our panel to share any kind of upcoming events, maybe webinars, resources. So just opening it up to everyone before we close out. And if not, oh.
I'll jump in quick. I was waiting for someone else. We are in the process of finalizing our fall programming, which will include 4 new webinars around specific SDGs and utilizing those in teaching and learning. So if you're interested in SDGs and using those as a framework in your classroom, keep an eye on our website, and more information will be shared soon.
And I'll jump into.
Oh, sorry, Nicole.
Go ahead, Cass. No worries.
Thank you. We're really excited to be launching our first ever Global Videos for Change competition in early 2021. So details are coming soon, but if you're interested in finding out more, you can sign up on our global website, which is videosforchange.org, but the link's in Composer.
And to build off what Mallory was saying too, our programs that are available on the Composer site are all aligned to standards, and some of them map directly to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So if that is an interest of yours, you know that both World Savvy and Global Nomads Group already has some content on Composer, so you could start to build your own string. We do have the 4 themes that are available right now on Composer: art and action, pandemic, one world, ocean health, and global hunger, which is highlighted in the string that Bijan created. We are launching a new theme on overcoming bias. So I know that was something that a couple people expressed interest in earlier, and should be available in the fall, if not the spring semester. And hopefully we'll get onto the Composer site. So we're really excited about that. And I'm sure, I believe Leanne will be sending out a follow-up email that has my information. I'd love to dive into a one-on-one demo with any of you to kind of explore the content a little bit more and see how you can integrate that into the new strings that you create on Composer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and really appreciate this time together. So take care, everyone, and hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye.